Commander Sarah stood in the landing bay of Arcturus Prime and watched her soldiers file out of the transport ships. 5,000 humans, the entire contribution Earth was sending to the Galactic Conscription. She'd thought the number was strange when the orders came through. Other species were sending millions. They had mobilized 3 entire hive clusters. The aquatic nereids were deploying half their military-age population. But Earth, just 5,000. "Maybe they think we're not ready," Lieutenant had suggested during the flight. "We've only been in the council for 30 years. Hadn't been so sure. Something about the request felt off. The exact wording had been carefully diplomatic, almost apologetic. But orders were orders, and Earth needed to prove itself as a reliable council member. The staging area was massive, a converted asteroid base that had been hollowed out and pressurized decades ago. Thousands of alien soldiers moved through the corridors, representing species had only seen in briefings. The crystalline silicates refracted light as they marched in perfect formation. The fur-covered clustered in family groups, their children watching from observation decks. The reptilians sharpened their claws on designated posts, scales gleaming under the artificial lights. Led her command staff toward the registration center. They'd taken maybe 50 steps when she noticed the ahead of them suddenly veer away. The plant-based species were known for their peaceful nature. Their philosophers and poets celebrated across the galaxy. But the group of soldiers took one look at the approaching humans and scattered like leaves in wind. "That was weird," muttered. It got weirder. At the registration desk, the clerk's translator stumbled over itself when introduced her unit. The alien skin flushed through 3 different colors before settling on a pale, washed-out blue that's cultural briefing identified as fear. You are the humans," the clerk said, her gills fluttering rapidly. "From Earth." "That's right," replied, keeping her voice friendly. "We're here for conscription processing." The clerk's tentacles trembled as she entered data into her console. "Your barracks assignment is in Section 12. It's isolated from the main residential areas. For your comfort, of course." Frowned but accepted the documentation. Section 12 turned out to be on the far edge of the station, connected to the main complex by a single long corridor. The barracks themselves were spacious and well-equipped, but the isolation was obvious. They were being kept away from everyone else. Over the next few days, the pattern became impossible to ignore. When human soldiers entered the mess hall, entire sections would empty out. Training exercises were rescheduled to avoid overlap with human units. The few times managed to corner other species commanders for coordination meetings, they kept their distance, positioned themselves near exits, and watched the humans with the wariness people reserved for dangerous predators. On the 4th day, finally got an explanation, though not one she'd expected. She was reviewing the training schedules in her office when burst in, his face flushed with confusion and anger. "Ma'am, you need to see this," he said, pulling up a file on his tablet. "I've been trying to figure out why everyone's avoiding us, so I did some digging in the station's public data networks. Look what I found." The screen showed a discussion forum, one of the public channels where soldiers from different species were supposed to build camaraderie. Scrolled through pages of comments and felt her stomach drop as she read. "Has anyone else seen the human combat footage? I can't sleep. My entire squad requested transfers after watching their training videos. The way they laugh when they're under fire. It's not natural. I watched a human pull a fellow soldier from a burning vehicle. His hands were literally melting and he was smiling. What kind of species does that? The humans have a saying, pain is just weakness leaving the body. I looked it up. They teach this to their young. They celebrate suffering." Scrolled further, her chest tightening. The forum was filled with thousands of posts, all expressing variations of the same sentiment, terror. The galaxy was terrified of humanity. "They think we're monsters," said quietly. "The recruitment videos Earth sent, the standard documentation showing our military capabilities. They watched it like it was a horror show. pulled up Earth's official submission to the conscription committee. It was standard material, the kind every species provided. Combat training exercises, footage of soldiers in action, medical resilience demonstrations, awards ceremonies for battlefield valor. She'd seen these clips 100 times. They were meant to showcase human military professionalism. But now she watched them through alien eyes, and she understood. In one clip, a human soldier took shrapnel to the leg during a training exercise with live ammunition. He pulled out the metal fragment, applied a field bandage, and continued the exercise. His were cheering. The human narrator described it as showing grit under pressure. Another video showed a rescue operation in a collapsed building. Human firefighters ran into a structure that was actively burning, with stability warnings blaring. They emerged carrying 3 people, their own gear scorched and melting. One firefighter was laughing with relief when they made it out, even as medics treated him for second-degree burns. A third clip showed a memorial service for soldiers killed in action. The surviving squad members spoke about their fallen friends with pride, talking about sacrifice and duty and honor. One sergeant said, "They died so others could live. That's what we're here for." Closed her eyes. To humans, these were inspiring stories of courage and dedication. To species who had evolved on gentler worlds, who had never needed to develop such extreme pack bonding and self-sacrifice behaviors, these videos were proof that humans were fundamentally broken. Dangerously, terrifyingly broken. "There's more," said, his voice tight. He pulled up another file. "This is from the Council's division. Someone leaked it." The report was clinical and thorough. It analyzed human evolutionary history, comparing it to other known sapient species. The conclusions were damning. Humans had evolved as social hunters on what the report classified as a Class 7 death world. Their planet had forced them to develop unprecedented cooperation strategies just to survive. They'd learned to override individual survival instincts in favor of group survival. Their capacity for empathy was so overdeveloped that they could extend it even to other species, even to their prey animals, even to inanimate objects they'd anthropomorphized. The report noted that humans would mourn machines they'd nicknamed. They would risk their lives for creatures they'd only just met. They possessed the ability to voluntarily choose death for abstract concepts that other species barely understood. The report's conclusion was stark. Humanity represents a psychological profile unprecedented in known sapient life. Their capacity for self-sacrifice, while admirable in isolation, makes them fundamentally incompatible with standard military cooperation protocols. They cannot be reliably predicted to prioritize mission success over individual lives, including their own. A knock at the door interrupted reading. An officer stood in the corridor, scales a formal military gray. Admiral, if remembered the briefings correctly, one of their most decorated warriors. "Commander," said, his translator rendering his hissing speech into flat English. "May I speak with you privately?" Gestured him in. The admiral moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator, but he still maintained a careful distance from both humans in the room. "I've been tasked by the Joint Command to assess the situation," said. "The other species are refusing to deploy if humans are part of the operation. Several have threatened to withdraw from the Council entirely." "Because they're afraid of us," said flatly. "Yes," Tail lashed once. "Though I believe their fear is misplaced. They are warriors. We understand that soldiers must sometimes embrace danger. I've proposed a joint training mission with your forces. If we can demonstrate that humans are simply misunderstood, perhaps we can salvage this conscription." Wanted to refuse. Every instinct told her this would end badly, but Earth needed this. They needed to prove they could work within the galactic community. "When do we start?" she asked. The training mission was scheduled for 2 days later. Brought 3 squads of his finest warriors. Matched them with 3 of her own squads, including team. The scenario was simple. A hostage rescue in a simulated urban environment with automated drones playing the role of hostile forces. Everything went wrong within the first 15 minutes. Squad was advancing on the target building when one of the soldiers, a warrior named, triggered a trap. The simulation was sophisticated enough to create physical effects with force fields and sound. Debris collapsed on his position, pinning his leg. The squad immediately fell back to a defensive position, following their doctrine. The mission parameters designated his position as lost. They would complete the objective and extract him afterward if possible. Squad had different ideas. Watch from the command center as 3 human soldiers broke formation and sprinted directly into the collapse zone. Simulated enemy fire lit them up on all sides, their suits registering hits that would have been fatal in real combat. They didn't slow down. They reached, freed his leg from the debris, and dragged him back to cover, all while ignoring the tactical display screaming that they just committed suicide for a simulation. "What are they doing?" his translator hissed. The scenario designated that position as expendable. "They're getting your man out," replied, though her own heart was sinking. His voice crackled over the comm. Target secured. His mobile, continuing the mission. Himself sounded shaken. "You shouldn't have done that, the parameters." "We don't leave people behind," interrupted cheerfully. "Simulation or not." Watched scales shift from gray to a mottled orange that her briefing identified as distress. The other warriors had frozen in place, staring at the humans like they'd just witnessed something impossible. The mission was aborted 10 minutes later, not because of failures in execution, but because the refused to continue. Had to be escorted to medical, not for physical injuries, but because he was having what the doctors called a fear cascade response. In the aftermath briefing, spoke for all of them. "You chose emotional attachment over tactical success," he said, his voice flat with something between awe and horror. "You willingly sacrificed your positions, your mission objectives, your own simulated lives for one soldier who was already designated as lost. This was not bravery. This was madness." "No," said quietly, "this is who we are." That night, the Joint Command held an emergency session. Wasn't invited, but the results came through official channels within hours. 73% of the conscripted forces had formally refused to deploy alongside humans. The Galactic Council had 3 choices: force integration and watch the coalition collapse, send humans home and damage Earth's standing, or grant humanity an exemption from conscription. They chose the exemption, dressing it up in diplomatic language about humanity's unique psychological profile and specialized capabilities better suited for independent operations. Read the orders alone in her quarters. Earth had been rejected, not because humans weren't good enough, but because they were too much, too protective, too willing to die for others, too human. She was composing her report when the alarm started blaring throughout the station. The emergency broadcast cut through every speaker on Arcturus Prime. Recognized the voice of Council Administrator, the bureaucrat who'd been coordinating the conscription. His usual calm had shattered into something raw and desperate. "All forces, this is a priority alert. We've received a distress call from the mining colony Theta 7. The swarm has broken through the outer defenses. Approximately 30,000 civilians are trapped on site, mostly families of military personnel. The main fleet is 72 hours away." Pulled up the tactical display on her console. Theta 7 appeared as a red dot on the edge of Council space, pulsing with threat indicators. The data streaming in was devastating. They had committed at least 3 full swarm nodes to the attack. Any rescue force would be outnumbered 50-1, maybe more. "All available forces are to prepare for immediate deployment," continued, but could hear the hollow note in his voice. He was giving the order because protocol demanded it, not because he expected anyone to follow. The colony's live feeds were still broadcasting. Made the mistake of opening one. Families huddled in shelters, their chlorophyll-based skin pale with terror. Children clung to their parents in emergency water tanks. Workers tried to seal blast doors with their own bodies, and everywhere the screaming. Close the feed and open the tactical projection. The numbers were brutal and clear. Any force sent to Theta 7 would face a 93% casualty rate. They would swarm them, tear them apart, turn them into more biomass for the hive. It was a suicide mission with almost no chance of success. She pulled up the fleet manifests looking for which species had volunteered for the rescue. The list was empty. She refreshed it, still empty. Her comm chimed. His voice came through tight with anger. "Ma'am, are you seeing this? The council is debating evacuation protocols. They're talking about acceptable losses. Those are civilians down there." "I know. Children, Commander. There are children on those feeds." Pulled up the council's emergency channel. The various species commanders were indeed discussing the situation, their voices distorted by translator programs, but their reluctance clear in every word. "The tactical reality is unavoidable," Admiral was saying. "A rescue force would be destroyed before achieving meaningful results. We must accept that Theta 7 is lost and focus on preventing further advances." "But 30,000 civilians," a voice protested weakly. "Surely some evacuation attempt." "Would cost us 50,000 soldiers," a silicate commander cut in, her crystalline voice chiming discordantly. "The mathematics are clear. We cannot sacrifice the living for the already dead." "They're not dead yet," muttered to herself. She checked the colony's defensive status. Maybe 2 hours before the breached the final shelters. 2 hours before 30,000 people were consumed by the swarm. Her door chimed. She opened it to find and 3 other squad leaders crowding the corridor. "We're going," said simply. "I've already polled the troops. Every single one volunteered." "The casualty estimates." "We know." His face was set in hard lines. "We all know. But there are kids down there, Commander, families. People who just wanted to mine asteroids and live their lives. We can't just leave them." Should have said no. Should have reminded them about orders and chain of command, and the fact that Earth had just been exempted from conscription. Should have told them that throwing away 5,000 human lives for a probably futile rescue attempt would be the worst possible way to end humanity's first galactic military deployment. Instead, she opened her tactical display and started calculating jump coordinates. "Get everyone to the ships," she said. "We leave in 20 minutes." The human fleet broke orbit from Arcturus Prime without authorization, without support, without any hope of backup. Didn't bother asking the council for permission. They just waste time debating while people died. The transport ship's engines pushed beyond recommended limits, racing against the clock and the swarm. Spent the flight reviewing everything they knew about the swarm was ancient, older than most spacefaring civilizations. They didn't conquer or occupy. They consumed. Entire biospheres stripped down to bare rock. They couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be negotiated with. They were hunger given form and purpose. "Commander, we're getting telemetry from Theta 7, her communications officer called out. "It's bad." The tactical display updated. They had breached the outer shelters. The remaining civilians had retreated to the central complex, a glorified warehouse that had never been designed as a fortress. Maybe 45 minutes before the swarm broke through. ETA asked. 38 minutes if we push the engines to the red line. "Do it." The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel on the edge of Theta 7's system. The sight that greeted them would have broken most commanders. The colony was barely visible beneath a writhing mass of warriors. The creatures looked like someone had taken every predator in Earth's history and fused them into a single nightmare. Chitinous armor, serrated limbs, too many eyes, and there were thousands of them. Tactical AI helpfully calculated their odds. 3.7% chance of mission success. voice came over the squad channel. "Hey, Commander, did you see this? 3%, that's pretty good." Laughter rippled through the human channels. Smiled despite herself. Leave it to humans to find humor in impossible odds. All units, this is. Mission parameters are simple. Get those civilians out. I don't care about tactical doctrine. I don't care about acceptable losses. Those people are getting off that rock alive. Understood? Yes, ma'am. The response came back from 5,000 voices and had never been more proud of her species. The transport ships descended into hell. They swarmed up to meet them, a tide of claws and teeth and alien hunger. Human gunships provided covering fire, their weapons cutting bright lines through the horde. Punched through to the colony's landing pads, ramps dropping before they'd even fully touched down. Led the first wave personally. The moment her boots hit the ground, she was fighting. They moved fast, faster than anything that size had a right to move. Her rifle barked steady shots, her squad falling into practiced formations around her. "Push to the central complex," she shouted. "Cover the civilians." The human advance was nothing like standard military doctrine. They didn't establish defensive perimeters or fall back to consolidate positions. They surged forward like a wave, each squad covering the next, pushing deeper into the swarm. When soldiers fell, others dragged them back. When positions became untenable, they held them anyway, buying seconds with their blood. His helmet display lit up with status reports, casualties mounting, ammunition running low, medical supplies depleting. The numbers were exactly as bad as predicted, but they were moving forward. The central complex was surrounded. Warriors covered the walls like angry insects, tearing at the reinforced doors. The civilians inside were visible through the windows, pressed against the glass, watching their doom approach. Until humans arrived. Squad hit the cluster from the left flank. Another squad struck from the right. His team pushed straight up the middle. The swarm turned to face this new threat, and for a few precious minutes, the pressure on the complex eased. "Get those doors open," ordered. "Start evacuating." Engineers sprinted forward, plasma cutters out, working to breach the sealed entrance. Warriors threw themselves at the human lines. His rifle overheated. She switched to her sidearm, then to her combat knife. A warrior nearly took her head off before shot it at point-blank range. "Doors are open," an engineer called. Civilians poured out, terrified and stumbling. Families in portable water tanks carrying their young, elders who could barely walk. Thousands of them streaming toward the landing pads where waited. "Fall back by squads," ordered. "Cover the evacuation." The retreat was chaos. Human soldiers formed a fighting withdrawal, each squad holding until the civilians behind them were clear, then falling back to the next position. They pressed from all sides, sensing victory, pushing harder. That's when Hurd's voice over the comm, strangely calm. "Commander, we've got a problem. There's a kid, maybe 5 years old. Got separated from her family in the panic. She's trapped in a storage building, grid K7. The swarms between us and her." Pulled up the tactical map. Grid K7 was deep in territory. Any squad going in there wouldn't come back out. "Negative, that position is too hot. We'll circle back after." "Commander, with respect, I'm already moving. Out." Wanted to scream. She pulled up his helmet feed and watched him sprint toward the storage building, 3 soldiers from his squad following. The tactical display showed them as blue dots moving into a sea of red. They disappeared into the swarm. For agonizing minutes, heard only weapons fire and shouting over his channel. Then his voice came through, breathless but alive. "Got her, she's terrified but unhurt, heading back to the LZ." His blue dot moved on the tactical display, but slower now. Watched dozens of red dots converge on his position. "You've got hostiles on all sides." "Yeah, I noticed." His helmet cam showed the view. Everywhere, and in the middle, a small child clutched to his chest. His armor was scored with claw marks. His rifle was empty. He'd drawn his sidearm and was firing one-handed while using his body to shield the girl. The other 3 soldiers in his squad had formed a protective triangle around him. They were firing, falling back, firing again. Every step toward the landing zone cost them. One soldier went down, her leg torn open by claws. She kept firing from the ground until another soldier dragged her up. Watch take a hit to the shoulder, then another to his side. His medical sensors lit up red across the board. Injuries that should have dropped him, probably would kill him. But he kept moving, kept protecting the child, kept laughing. Laughing. "You know what?" His voice came through the comm, strained but somehow cheerful. "This kid's pretty brave, hasn't cried once. Gonna tell everyone about her when we get back." "You're critically injured," said, her voice tight. "You need immediate medical attention." "After we get the kid to safety, ma'am, not before." It took 6 hours. 6 hours of brutal fighting, of humans holding impossible positions so civilians could board the 6 hours of watching her soldiers fall, get back up, and keep fighting. 6 hours of proof that humanity was exactly as terrifying as the galaxy believed, just not in the way they'd thought. Made it to the landing zone. He placed the child gently into her mother's arms, smiled at them both, and then collapsed. Medics were on him immediately, but the damage was catastrophic. 17 separate injuries, any 3 of which should have been fatal. "Get him on the ship," ordered. "Get everyone on the ships, we're leaving." The last humans lifted off from Theta 7 as the finally overran the landing pads, watched the colony disappear beneath the swarm and counted the cost. 30,000 civilians evacuated. 0 civilian casualties. And humans, 4,200 still combat capable. 800 more were wounded but alive. That left. Closed her eyes. Too many. Too many soldiers who'd given everything so strangers could live. The trip back to Arcturus Prime was quiet. The humans tended their wounded, held memorials for their dead, and processed what they'd just survived. Spent most of the journey in the medical bay, watching doctors work on. Against all odds, he was going to make it, and broken but alive. "The kid okay?" he mumbled when he finally woke up, his words slurred by pain medication. "She's fine," said. "Her family wants to thank you personally." "Good, that's good," closed his eyes, worth it. The fleet arrived at Arcturus Prime to find the station in chaos. Every external screen was playing the footage. Someone in the human fleet had been streaming the entire operation, and it had spread across the galactic networks like wildfire. The galaxy watched humans sprint into a swarm that would have terrified professional soldiers, watched them hold positions that tactical doctrine called, watched them carry wounded aliens to safety while bleeding from dozens of wounds, watched protect a child who wasn't his species, wasn't his responsibility, wasn't anything to him except a person who needed help. And the galaxy watched him laugh while doing it. Disembarked to find a reception committee waiting. Every species commander was there, along with council administrator and a dozen other officials. She expected reprimands for unauthorized deployment, demands for explanations, maybe even formal charges. Instead, bowed. It was a human gesture, one he must have looked up specifically. Around him, other aliens mimicked the gesture in their own ways. Tail salutes, leaf folding, water-blessing poses. "Commander," said, his voice thick with emotion his translator couldn't quite convey. "On behalf of the Galactic Council and the 30,000 civilians who are alive because of your actions, thank you." "We did what anyone would do," said automatically. "No." Admiral stepped forward, his scales a color had never seen before, something between silver and gold. "That's precisely the point, Commander. No one else would have done it. No other species would have voluntarily accepted those casualties for civilians of different species. No other military force would have counted the mission a success when they lost nearly 1,500 soldiers." "They're not lost," said sharply. "They're heroes. They saved 30,000 people." Yes, translator carried something like wonder. They did, because they valued those alien lives as much as their own, more than their own. A female pushed through the crowd, moving faster than had ever seen one of her species move. She was carrying a small child, and recognized the girl from helmet cam. The child was clutching a drawing, crude but earnest, showing stick figures and bright colors. "Please," the mother said, her voice breaking, "please let me thank the soldier, the one who saved my daughter." Led them to the medical bay. Was sitting up now, covered in bandages and medical sensors, looking tired but alert. When he saw the child, his face lit up. "Hey, you're okay." He held out his hand for a high five, then remembered didn't have hands and awkwardly converted it to a wave. "Sorry, still learning the cultural stuff." The child carefully climbed onto his bed and presented the drawing. It showed a human soldier, recognizable by the helmet, holding a small green figure. Above them were stars and what might have been hearts, or maybe just more stars. "She wanted to give this to you," the mother said. "She doesn't have words yet for what you did. None of us do." Stared at the drawing and watched something shift in his expression. The easy humor faded, replaced by something deeper. I couldn't leave her. You understand that, right? I saw her on the scanner, alone and scared, and I just couldn't leave her there." "We know," the mother said. "That's what terrifies us. That's what we never understood." Over the next few days, the full analysis trickled in from experts, military strategists, and cultural anthropologists across the galaxy. They'd all been wrong about humans. Dangerously, fundamentally wrong. Read the reports in her quarters, sitting across from her, still recovering but insisting on staying informed. "Listen to this," she said. "From the Institute of Xenobiology, we hypothesized that human protective instincts would make them unreliable in military operations. We feared they would prioritize their own pack over mission objectives. We failed to understand that humans extend their pack instincts to encompass all sapient life. They do not protect only their own. They protect everyone, regardless of species, regardless of personal cost. This is not a military liability. This is the most profound form of altruism observed in any known sapient species." Snorted, took them long enough to figure it out. Here's one from high command. "The pride themselves on warrior culture and battlefield honor. We believed humans were reckless and undisciplined. We now understand that human military doctrine is built on a principle we lack, that no life is expendable, that every person matters, that victory is worthless if it costs you your soul. They have much to learn from humanity." Kept reading. Report after report, all reaching the same conclusion. The galaxy had feared humanity for the wrong reasons. They'd seen the protective instincts, the pain tolerance, the willingness to die for others, and assumed it made humans dangerous to their allies. They'd never imagined it made humans dangerous to themselves on their allies' behalf. The formal council session was held a week later, once all the wounded had been stabilized and the casualty reports finalized. Stood before the assembled representatives, her dress uniform crisp, her bearing military straight. Council administrator spoke first. "Commander, this session has been convened to address the human species' role in the Galactic Conscription. Recent events at Theta 7 have forced us to reconsider our previous conclusions." Waited, stood beside her, still moving carefully but insisting on attending. "We believed," continued, "that humans were incompatible with other species for military cooperation. We thought your protective instincts, your disregard for personal safety, your tendency to prioritize lives over tactical efficiency. We thought these made you dangerous." He paused, his alien features unreadable. "We were correct. You are dangerous, but not in the way we feared." His voice grew stronger. "You are dangerous to yourselves. You will sacrifice your own lives without hesitation if it means saving others. You will face impossible odds, accept devastating casualties, endure unimaginable pain, all because you believe every life matters. This terrifies us, Commander, because we realize that if humans will die for strangers, what won't they do for allies? Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species nodded, their various gestures of agreement creating a strange symphony of motion. The Galactic Conscription, said, was designed to compel species to contribute military forces during times of crisis. But you cannot conscript people who volunteer for suicide missions without being asked. You cannot force commitment from those who give it freely. He pulled up a holographic document, official seals glowing in the air. Therefore, the Galactic Council has created a new designation for humanity, Voluntary Defense Force, unattached. You will never be conscripted. You will never be compelled to fight. Felt her chest tighten. This was it. The formal rejection dressed up in diplomatic language. Instead, continued, when the galaxy faces threats that require someone to hold impossible lines, to accept missions no sane military commander would approve, to value alien lives as much as their own, there is only one species we will call, and based on the evidence at Theta 7, we believe humanity will answer. Every time, said quietly, we'll answer every time. The chamber erupted in applause or the alien equivalents, mandible clicking, silicate harmonic ringing, water percussion. It lasted for 5 full minutes. When it finally quieted, Admiral rose. Commander, I must make a personal apology. When I saw your soldiers rescue Warrior during the training simulation, I called it madness. I said you had chosen emotional attachment over tactical success. His scales shifted to a deep, respectful blue. I was wrong. You didn't choose emotion over tactics. You chose a higher tactical principle, one that never considered, that soldiers who know they will never be abandoned will fight harder, hold longer, and give more than any conscripted force. You didn't break doctrine. You taught us that our doctrine was broken. Cleared his throat, sir, if I may. Nodded. We're not special, said, his voice carrying across the chamber. We're not superheroes or some kind of perfect soldiers. We're just us. We grew up on a planet where survival meant cooperation, where the strongest survived by protecting the weak, where we learned that individual life is precious, which means all life is precious. He gestured to his bandages. Yeah, we take damage. Yeah, we get hurt, but pain fades, scars heal. The knowledge that you left someone behind, that you could have helped and didn't, that stays with you forever. Silence filled the chamber. Then a representative stood. I have a question for Lieutenant. When you went back for the child, when you sustained all those injuries, did you ever regret your choice? Didn't hesitate. No, ma'am. Only regret I have is that I couldn't move faster. The sat back down, her leaves trembling with emotion. The session ended with formal documentation. Humanity would maintain its own command structure, operate independently of the main conscription forces, and be contacted only for specialized operations. The Council created a dedicated channel, one that would reach directly to Earth's military command, and walked back to the human barracks together, moving through corridors that were no longer empty. Aliens nodded to them as they passed. Some even approached to offer personal thanks for Theta 7. Think they'll actually call us? Asked. Yeah, said. When things get bad enough that no one else will go, they'll call, and we'll answer. Every time. Every time. 3 months later, the dedicated channel activated for the first time. A swarm node had been spotted heading for a civilian research station. The main fleet was days away. Casualties for any rescue force were estimated at 85%. Stood in Earth's military command center and looked at the faces of her staff. She didn't need to ask. She could see the answer in their eyes. Get the fleet ready, she said. We've got people to save. The ships launched within the hour, carrying 5,000 volunteers who'd signed up the moment they'd heard. As transport climbed toward orbit, she looked back at Earth through the viewport. their beautiful, terrible death world, the planet that had made them what they were. "Thank you," she whispered to it, "for teaching us that everyone is worth saving." The stars swallowed them and humanity went to war again, not for glory or territory or conquest, but because somewhere in the darkness, people needed help. And humans never learned how to say no to that.